Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have another fantastic guest with us today. Army veteran and also still helping the Army, Mark Overberg is with us. And Mark will tell us a little bit about how he's helping the veterans and soldiers of today to transition into being veterans for tomorrow. Mark, how are you, sir? Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's good to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to
Of
talk to you
course, of
folks.
course. Yeah, I've enjoyed watching quite a few things that you're helping folks with online. I'm sure we're going to get to that, but before we get to today, why don't we take a little bit of a history trip? We'll go back in time a few decades for you and share with our listeners what led you as an individual to want to join and serve in the military. How did all that come about?
Well, it was, as you can probably tell from the graveyard, it was a while ago. Back in 1985, I was living in Northeast Ohio. I was married, and that was, you may have heard the term Rust Belt, and that was a true depiction of the time. I was working for a steel company and was laid off, and then was trying to find a job, and it was in those early 80s. It was pretty rough there, and so an option became joining the military, and so that's what I did. And my original thought was just to enlist for 4 years, and then get some money for a GI Bill and get my master's degree, and so that was the thought process back then.
And 4 years turned into a few more than that.
4 years turned into 22.
22. Yeah, God bless you.
My wife was not terribly excited when I told her what I had done.
22. That's a long time. What were some of the training camps or places you got to travel a little bit with the service?
Well, when I enlisted, it was to be an all-source intel analyst, specifically as a paratrooper. So I knew I was going to Fort Bragg, to the 82nd Airborne Division, for my first assignment, and who knows after that. But so obviously Fort Bragg, and then from there I went to officer candidate school, became an officer. My first assignment as an officer, other than training at Fort Knox, was in Germany. And that was a great place to be a lieutenant. That was the late 80s. I was in a cavalry squadron. We did border tours guarding the East German and Czechoslovakian borders back before the wall came down. And so it's a great place to be. And after that, I went back. Army decided that no longer was I going to be a cavalry officer. They changed me over into ordnance, which I didn't even know what it was at the time. But went to the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland for training, and then to Fort Knox actually for an assignment for about 4 years. Then did a interesting assignment after that with as a trainer with the Army National Guard, an active duty trainer with the Army National Guard in South Carolina. And it really opened my eyes to see what the rest of the Army was about there. And then after South Carolina, Command and General Staff College, and then at Fort Leavenworth, and then finally back to Fort Bragg, second time. And then from there to the Pentagon was my last assignment. So mostly kind of Southeast U.S., Midwest and Southeast U.S.
Sure. Yeah, in Aberdeen, I have fond memories there. Chesapeake Bay, a lot of towns. I spent some time living in a town called Havre de Grace down there. Just wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful
yes.
area.
Very familiar with it.
That's fantastic. So the 4 years turned into 22. And then as you retired, walk us through what you learned through that process, because I know it's relevant to what you're doing now. So how was that for you, and what was that initial phase like?
So working in the Army G1 as my last assignment, I was aware of, there was a small office called the Retirement Services Office. And so I was aware of that. I had some familiarity. One of my jobs there was as the executive officer for for a 1-star. And so I was familiar with the office and knew that stuff had existed. But when I finally decided to retire, uh, I had to do a lot of homework, and I knew that I shouldn't wait. Just intuition told me that. But it was finally, I was about 6 months out from retirement when I finally started really investigating and studying. Um, at that time, the Army policy was for people to take what was a glorified PCS brief, essentially, is the retirement brief, was that you had to do that 4 months before you retired. Well, I took 90 days of terminal leave. So 30 days before my final out, I'm getting my retirement briefing. Fortunately, I had done a lot of work before that on my own. And so that experience, when a couple of years later, when I came back to the Army G1 as the Deputy Director of Retirement Services, I said, we have to fix this. There is a lot of information, a lot of laws and policies that people are unaware of, and they get rushed into making that decision. And so I wanted to develop a step-by-step process over time so people wouldn't be rushed. And the big driving factor for that is that when somebody retires and they go back to either where the job takes them or they go back to the home area, they're going to get asked, people, well, where'd you come from? What'd you do? And they're going to talk about their military service. I want that conversation to be a good one, because that's how most Americans find out about the military, is by talking to veterans.
Right.
And if the veteran doesn't say a good thing, or if he complains about things, that's the impression Americans get. And so the transition really needs to be good in order to help Americans understand us, and then, of course, help recruit the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting that you were keenly aware of your own transition. Like while you're doing it in real time, you were already like kind of making your own SOP of how it should have gone, how it should have been improved. And then you took that back to the Army and they were like, okay, so you take over now.
It's exactly right. And we've created, the Army is the only service that has a defined retirement planning process. And it's part of the U.S. Army Retirement Planning Guide. We're now converting that into the retirement planning toolkit on the Soldier for Life website. The other services don't do the same thing that the Army does here. We're quite deliberate in most things, especially once you've been in the military a while, you understand planning. And so you really need to plan to transition, because if you've served 20 years or sometimes 30 years, it's what you know, but you have to learn something that's completely different. Culture's different, employment's different, the systems you're used to will no longer be with you, or less or so. So there's so much to know. There's so much to understand. That's why we've put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, and I've been watching. You post quite a few things on LinkedIn, which is where I follow you. But you mentioned a website for our listeners' sake. Soldiers for Life, is that a .gov, or is it a
Yeah. If the easy way to do it is just Google Soldier for Life, but
Okay.
The actual website is Soldier for Life, all one word, soldierforlife.army.mil.
Okay, .army.mil. I'll make sure I put the exact link underneath our online for this episode. Okay, great.
Yeah, and so there we've got that's the larger Soldier for Life program. I have a part of that, and so mine is soldierforlife.army.mil/retirement. Make it easy for me.
Yeah, I'll put both links out there. Excellent. So walk us through, if you could, kind of your day to day now, or maybe month to month, quarter to quarter. How do you do this now? Because I know you have a very big goal of a certain number you want to help. Is there like a cycle throughout the year that you're in front of a room full of folks that are maybe 2 years from retirement, 1 year? How does that typically work?
So you're right. Excuse me. There is a large audience that I'm responsible for. When somebody asks me, typically, what do you do for the Army? I said, well, I've got two primary responsibilities. Excuse me. The first one is to prepare soldiers to retire. That's 30,000 soldiers every year that retire out of the Army. And that's all three components: active, National Guard, and Army Reserve. And so that's the one part is, and generally I pick up soldiers, take responsibility for them starting at the 17-year mark. No matter how long they serve, most serve between 20 and 22 years. So we pick them up at the 17-year mark in case they retire at 20 and walk them through this 3-year process of retirement planning. So the first part of my job is retirement planning. Then once somebody retires from the military, it's my job to take care of them for the rest of their lives and their surviving spouses as well. So the post-retirement policies and services is my responsibility as well, across the world. And so there are now 1,013,000 retired soldiers.
Wow.
Plus there's another 250,000 surviving spouses. And so there are policies and regulations that govern what we do for them. And part of my job is, and that's why you see me on LinkedIn. Excuse me, you see me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to link up with soldiers getting ready to retire, to warn them about it and show them the resources available. But I'm also talking to retired soldiers so that they understand what's important, what things have changed for them, benefits, laws, policies that change, make sure they're aware of things.
Oh, that's incredible. I didn't realize it was 30,000 a year are retiring. I did not know it was that high. So I know our recruiting numbers coming in aren't, that math's not working out too well, but that's incredible that you're able to have an operation like that for that many soldiers. That's incredible. Incredibly impressive.
Well, I don't do it all. I have a very,
I know.
very small staff.
Yeah. I should hope not, but it's still a big number. I didn't realize it was that high. So, and the spouses.
And that's generally the reaction I get, especially even when I talk to senior leaders. They're surprised at the numbers. Another number that would surprise you, every year, and I'm just talking Army here. Every year, the Army pays out $23 billion in retired pay and survivor benefit plan annuities. So that's it's quite a lot.
It's a big dent, that's for sure. Yeah, it is incredible. And then, so you said you had there's a program to take care of them for life. So 5 years later, someone that retired, maybe they're not adjusting well, or maybe they didn't like some of the decisions they made about maybe their insurance or their TSP rollover or something like that. So they reach out to your team, and then basically you would re-engage them and kind of just counsel them in a sense of going through whatever changes they're trying to make. Is that how that would work?
Right. And so obviously I can't individually, and my staff is very small. It's less than 10 people. And so what we have is, obviously we can't, I do individually help some, but for the most part not. So what we have, the Army has, and again, this is a little different than the other services. The Army has what we call retirement services officers, and they are in all three components. So briefly explaining, in the Army National Guard, at every state headquarters, there's what we call an RSO, and their job is to help prepare those National Guardsmen in that state for retirement. In the Army Reserve, at the 4 readiness divisions, plus the 9th MSC out in Hawaii, they have RSOs as well. And again, their job is to prepare those Army reservists within the command for their retirement. Now, at the installation, Army installation level, under the U.S. Army Installation Management Command, there are retirement services officers at most installations. These are GS employees for the most part. In the Guard and Reserve, those RSOs are military. At the installation level, they're civilians. A few of them are contractors, but predominantly they're civilians. And they do the whole gamut. They do retirement planning for active duty and AGRs. And then they also, one of their major duties is to take care of the retired community. And so that's the local point of contact, that if somebody has a question, they should go to their local retirement services officer. And on our website, if you come to the soldierforlife.army.mil/retirement, up at the top, it says contact retirement services officer. And that's got a link to all the RSOs in all three components, email addresses, phone numbers, so they can reach out to the local representative who can advise them. These RSOs, again, this is a little bit different than the other services. These RSOs have to go through a certification process. When they take the job, they have to go through 2 certification courses. It takes about a week to learn how to be an RSO, learn all of the various programs that they have to either be the subject matter expert on, or, for example, if you have a question about TRICARE, well, the RSO is not the TRICARE expert. So what the RSO ends up often doing, if you ask the RSO, hey, I got this issue with TRICARE, and maybe it's related to Medicare, the RSO knows enough about the program to explain the basics, but then to connect you to the subject matter expert.
I see.
But in some areas, the RSO is the subject matter expert. So, for example, the survivor benefit plan, the RSO goes through a certification course on that before they can talk to anybody about it, and learn what that law is and how it's a huge financial decision soldiers make when they retire. So the RSO has to go through some training, the local RSOs, in order to be able to properly advise service members.
Wow. I am so proud of the Army that we have figured out, and you have led the way on this program, because, like you said, it's the only branch that actually has this. And you're right. The way we take care of soldiers while they're in is one thing, and the way we show that we take care of them afterward and their spouses is a whole nother. And if more civilians saw that and heard about that, I mean,
well, I didn't ask you to do that, but you sort of teed up one of the big reasons why we do this. You referenced earlier that we have a little bit of a recruiting problem going on right now, predominantly with the Army, but the other services are having challenges too. And part of the reason we have a problem with that, some of the culture has changed, and we need to change a little bit for that. But there's demographics that are causing problems as well. So I was reading a study a few years back that showed that in 1960, 40% of all American males over the age of 16 were veterans. 40% in 1960. So, I mean, it was your dad, it was your uncle, it was your brother, it's the guy next door. Everybody was a veteran, and everybody knew who the veterans were.
Yeah.
I mean, those were the World War II veterans. Those were the Vietnam, early Vietnam veterans. In 1960, it was the World War I, World War II, and Korea veterans predominantly. But over time, especially in the 70s, when we converted to a volunteer army, the number of veterans has slowly been decreasing. We've lost our World War I vets. We've lost most of our World War II vets. We're losing most of our Korean vets. Even the Vietnam vets are now are declining. And so now, as we look at the American population, what were 40% veterans, now it's less than 7%. It's a little over 6.5% are veterans. And what does that mean to us? Most Americans don't know a veteran. They have never encountered service. They don't understand what it means and the importance of it and what the benefits of service are. That translates to not encouraging their kids that the military is a way ahead for them. It's a great place to start, even if they don't do a career. What's good about service? Well, there are a lot of good things about service. And so that's why, it's important for veterans to understand that we can't all be quiet. Y'all don't have to talk as much as I do, but we need every veteran to, to acknowledge that they're a veteran, to be less inconspicuous. Typically, veterans are humble. Sometimes not, but often they are. And so nobody knows that they're a veteran. They don't understand, what they've been through, the service they've had, and how this military service has actually helped them. And so those are some of the challenges in terms of recruiting. We need to be a little bit more visible, and talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with this, sir. I'll tell you, I mean, one of the many reasons that the show came about, and we broadcast out of WBR, which is a veteran-owned radio station. Not all listeners even probably know that. Not even sure all the staff knows it, but I've mentioned before that on the show, this program, our listeners know that I said the stats before that World War II, 25% of American households were part of the military, one way or another. So if it wasn't you, it was your neighbor. And Vietnam, 10%, and now 1%. So yes, without our voices being heard, which the name of our show is Lima Charlie, loud and clear, veteran stories being shared. I really feel passionate that that's really what our communities need is to hear more stories, to hear more firsthand accounts of what it was like for someone to serve and what it's been like afterwards. So the fact that you're doing such a high level and such a large canvas, if you will, of future retired veterans, that you're preparing them for success. That is a talking point. Recruiters should be picking up on that. And I'm not sure how those two worlds can connect directly, but they should. It should be a full circle of getting that out there.
Well, we do, as a matter of fact, that that is so. One of the talking points, one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm talking to soldiers who are getting ready to retire. I created the Army's retirement planning newsletter back in 2018 to help them do bite-sized chunks of getting ready to retire. And the name of the newsletter is called Change of Mission. It's on our website. And the reason I called it Change of Mission is because of the idea that when you retire from the military, your mission changes. No longer are you training and deploying to fight and win our nation's wars, but you still have a mission. So it's really just a change of mission when you retire. And so, well, what's the mission for retired soldiers? And I'll tell you about why I use that term in a minute. The mission for retired soldiers, we made this very easy for me to remember and talk about. It's called Hire and Inspire. Two words and they rhyme. So even I can remember that. And so, people, okay, so what does hire and inspire mean? Well, the hire part is to help veterans find employment. If you can hire a veteran, great. If you can refer them to a job or help them get to a job, that's great. Why is that important? Well, something that people don't quite understand very well is back in 2012, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Ray Odierno, created a program called the Soldier for Life program. And it was created for a number of reasons, but one of the initial reasons was to help him with this one particular problem. When a soldier leaves the Army, through ETS, maybe does his 3-year, 4-year tour or whatever and leaves the Army. And they go back home and they don't get a job and they file for unemployment compensation. Who pays for that? The Army does. The Army pays for the unemployment. And so back in 2011, when General Odierno was working on creating this program, the Army paid $515 million in unemployment compensation. $500 million just for unemployment for soldiers who got out and didn't get a job and went on unemployment.
Wow.
And what makes that worse is the fact that that money comes out of what we call the O&M, operations and maintenance funds. Those are the funds we use to pay soldiers' salary, pay for their training, pay for their new equipment. And so every dollar we have to pay in unemployment compensation is a dollar we can't use for those other things. And so we wanted to find a way to reduce the unemployment compensation costs. It's down under 100 million now.
Wow.
And so how do we do that? Well, part of it is to operationalize our veterans. And there's what we call the Sea of Goodwill. There are a lot of veteran service organizations, a lot of companies out there, labor unions, community collaboratives that really want to help. And so the Soldier for Life program was about invigorating that, getting those who want to help. And now unemployment for veterans is below the non-veterans. I was reading a study about a year ago by the Pew Research Foundation, and they were showing from 1980 to I think it was to 2018. It showed the income for veterans versus non-veterans. Veterans make about 20% more than non-veterans, and so but people don't understand that. They don't understand why it's better and what you learn, what you get in the military that makes you so valuable as an employee. So I'm stepping off my soapbox here in a minute, but it's so this is what drives us is to try to explain to people why this is important, and our retired community and our veteran community is important.
Yeah, I love it. I'm right with you on the soapbox. Hiring veterans is like one of the smartest things any business owner can do if they want to grow and have loyalty and people that are all in all day. You don't typically find that. No offense to the folks out there that went right to school and all that. That's wonderful, but there's no comparing experience from the military and the hard and soft skill sets you leave it with to a couple letters after your name. I mean, they're both valuable, but I would take experience all day from the military in the corporate sector. It highly valuable. I did not realize that the compensation stat. Did you say it was 20%? 20% more?
About 20%.
Yeah, so that's another recruiting tip that should be out there.
Yeah, and so I mentioned I use the term retired soldier, and again, this is something a little bit different for the Army.
Sure.
And people say, why do you do that? Why do you say retired soldier? Because the common term is retiree, and I actually was the instigator for this. It's now actually Army policy.
Love it.
So my dad's passed, but he was too young during World War II. He was in college during the Korean War, and then he was too old to serve in Vietnam, so he never served a day in his life. And when he retired, he was a retiree. So I didn't really want to lump retired service members, retired soldiers into the same group of retirees. They're a little bit different.
Sure.
But the idea of the hire and inspire and continuing to serve didn't make sense that we would, when somebody retired, we would take the title soldier away from them and call them a retiree, which for older folks, retirees had sort of a negative connotation. And so since we don't want to take the term soldier away from them, we sort of have to distinguish them from an active duty soldier, a National Guard soldier, an Army Reserve soldier. And that was to call them a retired soldier. They still have the title. We capitalize the R in retired. And so it's part of their title. And so now we treat them with respect that they're due. And I refer to the retired community, which is actually the Army's largest demographic, as the Army's fourth component. It's the largest component. For those who are on the show understand, Compo 1 is active duty, Compo 2 is Army National Guard, and Compo 3 is Army Reserve. If you add those three components together, it's not as big as Compo 4, which is the retired community.
That's something. Yeah.
So we just have to we just have to figure out ways to invigorate and to make sure that they understand they're still on the team and we still need them.
Yeah, I love it, Mark. I love it. This is good stuff. So, and like I said, we'll make sure we have all the links. I'll talk to you offline, and we'll get everything on there so folks can follow what you're doing, get the resources there, share it with someone they know that could use it, and like you said, have the parents, maybe teachers as well, start realizing, hey, there's a lot of value here that maybe wasn't being discussed before. So
there is, and there's actually a program. So if any of your listeners want to help, there is a way to do that.
okay.
There's a program called the Community Partner Outreach Program, and that is a way to link up community partners with their local recruiting station or recruiting battalion, and to figure out how best to use the assets or the skills of that community partner. And it doesn't have to be just veterans. Obviously, we want veterans to do that, but it doesn't have to be veterans. It can be anybody who wants to help with the recruiting mission. So there's always a way to help.
Awesome. Good stuff, Mark. I really appreciate the time. I always try to ask one more fun question, if I could.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've lived, I'm going to say, a couple different lives here. You're a retired soldier, but you're still working with the Army. So I guess we'll say that that's overtime, retired soldier overtime. But now that you've gone through these two incredible careers, if you could time travel back to 1985, when you were in the Rust Belt and you were looking at job opportunities and you just weren't sure, and the thought crossed about join the Army. If you could talk to young Mark now with the knowledge you have, what would be the advice or guidance that you'd give him?
If I were to talk to myself back in July of 1985, I would say, this, you don't know what the future's going to be, but I'm going to tell you, it's a good decision. Go for it. Do it. You won't regret it. And I have not. I've been living the dream, they say, for since 1985. So coming up on 38 years. And it's been a great life. Every morning I get up with all kinds of energy about all the things we got to do. And it's all to serve Americans. I want to give you a little tidbit, a little advance notice on something.
Sure.
So one of the earlier I was talking about veterans, in particular Army veterans, and you can walk by a veteran on the street and not know that they're a veteran. And we want our veterans to be more visible talk, to engage in conversations with Americans, because roughly 50% of America's youth say they know nothing about their military, and they're not going to join something that they don't know anything about.
Right.
And so I needed to find a way to make, in my case, Army veterans more visible. And it turned out that we didn't have a good way to do that. And so anyway, I'm going to be launching around the 1st of August what I call the Soldier for Life clothing line.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so we've taken the logo, program logo for the Soldier for Life program, and we'll be putting it on polos, t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts, ball caps. In the fall, when it gets cooler, especially where you live, putting it on hoodies and other things. But the purpose of this will be for our veterans to wear the gear and to show their pride in service, but also what tends to happen when somebody wears that Soldier for Life logo is it opens up a conversation. Somebody will say, "What's that about?" It's were you in the Army? Those kind of things. And it allows them to explain all these positive reasons for serving. And hopefully that'll help our recruiting as well. Yeah. So the Soldier for Life clothing line is coming out. It'll be out this fall. Originally, we're putting it out through AAFES, the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. But it's also licensed now to 280 companies. They can produce the Soldier for Life clothing line as well. So that'll be a way for veterans to show who they are, be a little bit more visible.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I'll make sure I get a link from you once it's on there, because we'll put that on our site as well. Help promote it for you. Yeah, great. That's great. Yeah, you're right. I have a good friend, Bob, that loves wearing his Air Force hat, and every time we go out anywhere, it always starts a conversation. Always, 100%. Whether we're at a local coffee shop or he's walking the mall, someone will seek him out because it's such a an obvious, from a distance, his particular hat that he wears has a really nice large I want to say logo, but you know what I'm saying, the seal there. Mm-hmm. And always could turn a 5-minute coffee run into a half-hour conversation, but veterans love talking to other folks, and I think that is a great way. That's a great icebreaker. I love it.
And here's the kicker on when people buy when veterans buy the Soldier for Life gear, the companies that produce it, they pay a licensing royalty back to the Army that goes directly into the Army Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Fund.
Oh, good. So a little bit of
which supports soldiers and their families. Yeah,
well, that's good. That's good. Awesome stuff. I'm pumped. I'm not going to re-enlist or anything, but I'm pumped. This is
no, but think back to the hire and inspire. You're not going to train and deploy to fight and win our nation's wars anymore, but what you're doing is exactly what we're asking veterans to do. Talk about your service. Help Americans understand what it means to be a veteran and how we really need people to serve in the military. Yeah. So you're doing a great job for us.
Well, thank you, Mark. That means a lot to me. I'm humbled by that statement. Thank you. So, well, folks, we've had a wonderful time today talking with retired soldier for life, Mark Overberg, and follow us online. We'll have the links to everything he discussed today, so you don't have to worry about memorizing or writing them down. Just go ahead and go to the LimaCharlieShow.com, and underneath today's show, you will see all the things Mark referenced, and see what you can do to get involved. Mark's absolutely right about what he said. The community conversation needs to change and improve about what it's like to serve our country. So thank you, Mark, for everything you and your team are doing. I really appreciate the time, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll be happy to keep promoting anything else you keep us updated on.
Great, Rob. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank you. All right, folks.